Hi guys, and welcome to the first part of the webinar about teaching new words. My name is Anastasia. I've been working as a teacher of English for about 10 years. I've been working for 2 years here in Skyen in corporate department, and recently I've become a premium teacher. I have vast experience in working with various students and of course teaching new words, which I'm going to share with you today. Today we are going to talk about challenges of vocabulary teaching, principles of vocabulary learning and practical activities that are going to help you to apply these principles, and then we're going to summarize the workshop, working out a clear strategy for vocabulary teaching. I would like to start with the challenge. Although you can't answer me, I still want to ask you a question. Can you recall your best friend's phone number right now without looking anywhere? Probably some of you can, but my experience shows that not many people can do that immediately. But I have another question. Can you recall your own phone number? Please text me if you can't. Right, so why and what is the difference? I guess you already know where I'm going with this. Of course, we recall our phone number easily because we use it quite often. For example, we sign up on different websites. We dictate our phone number in different situations, maybe in a bank, for example, or to a person who we've just met. But we never need to do the same with our best friend's phone number. It's stored in our mobile phone directory, and we don't have to keep it in our head. And with new words, it works in a quite similar way. That is why we need to understand how information is stored in our memory so that we could understand how to retrieve it from our memory and what activities we can use for that. That is why let's recall two types of memory from psychology. You probably know about short-term memory and long-term memory. Let's discuss some details and some numbers. So short-term memory is limited in duration. It lasts up to 30 seconds. Not much information can be processed in one time. Of course, it depends on the person, but it's going to be from 4 to 7 units of information, plus minus 2. I want to emphasize that we are not speaking about words here. We're speaking about units of information. So it can be a word, a collocation, or just some piece of rule. And finally, holding information in short-term memory demands repetition. It's quite easy to guess that long-term memory is an opposite thing. So in long-term memory, information is stored more permanently. It has enormous durability and can accommodate any amount of new information. Our role as teachers is to help our students to transfer information from short-term memory to long-term memory. And is it an easy thing to do? And what's the key to success? Definitely it's not easy, because if it was easy, we would not be here, right? Which means that we have to work hard. And as with that challenge, with that phone number, what helped us to recall our own phone number so quickly is that we repeated it many times. So with new words, repetition is also the key. So summing up, we need to work hard to transfer information to long-term memory, and the more often we retrieve information from our long-term memory, the easier it is to access in the future. Naturally, we can't help our students if we don't do any activities or exercises with them. And the choice of exercises depends on principles of vocabulary learning. In this webinar, we are going to talk about 5 principles of vocabulary learning and discuss each of them in detail. So the first principle is called cognitive depth. Probably sounds a bit complicated, but let's think. Cognitive is about thinking and understanding, and depth quite self-explanatory, so some kind of deep thinking. So guys, what information do we need to understand about a word to be able to use it correctly in the future? Here you can pause the video and think about it for some time, come up with some ideas. But I'm going to tell you that these are the things that we need to know. For example, we need to know the meaning of the word, its form and pronunciation, parts of speech, whether it's a noun, a verb, or an adjective, collocations, like what other words should go together with this word, and colligation, which is similar to collocations, but it's about syntaxes, if we should use a noun after a verb or an adjective before a noun. Also, we need to know synonyms, opposites, register, and many other things. That's not the end of the list. We call all these things aspects of the word knowledge. And the idea of the principle of cognitive depth is to elicit as many aspects of the word knowledge as we can. We have a lot of activities for this principle on our platform. If you pause the video and think about it, you will recall many exercises, and I'm going to give you some examples. First of all, various matching exercises. Here we are going to match words, new words with their definitions, words and pictures, new words with their synonyms or their opposites. We are going to match words for collocations. We are going to match sentence halves and a lot of things. Here you have a selection of exercises from our platform. Again, you can pause the video and try to guess what aspects are being explored in these exercises. But I'm going to tell you that the first two exercises help our students to understand the meaning of the word. The exercise to the right helps them with opposites, and the exercise below helps them with collocations. Another type of exercises that we have is sorting exercises. Normally we would have different groups of words, and we would ask our students to put verbs in the corresponding groups. And the aspect which is being covered here, again, you can pause the video and think about it, but now I'm going to tell you that we are going to explore hyponymy. And one more type of exercises, which is gap filling, like this one. And the aspect which we're going to cover is how words are used in a sentence. Very often we don't really give our students any information explicitly, but we encourage the student to work it out themselves from the context. New vocabulary is often presented in some context. We would on the platform we would have some texts, and here we are going to practice asking questions to elicit some aspects of vocabulary. So this is our target sentence. Interrupting others is annoying, so try to break the habit. You see the collocation in bold, our key collocation, break the habit. So let's think, what pieces of the context help us to analyze this collocation, and what questions we can ask about it to elicit the meaning. Meaning is one of the aspects, so what questions can we ask? Again, you can pause the video here, think about some questions you can ask. First of all, we can elicit the meaning and like some basic information about break, because it's the verb here, like is break a verb or a noun. We can ask what helped them to guess. We have this to, so we can understand that it's a verb. And we also need to make sure the student knows the meaning of break, because here the trick is that break is not used in its literal meaning, but if the student doesn't know any meaning of the word break, it's going to be a problem. So we can ask, like, what does break mean? But instead, probably a bit better would be to ask, what other things can you break? Because if your student says, break a glass, break, I don't know, a bone, break a leg, probably they understand the meaning. And then it's important to switch the focus from literal meaning to literal meaning, right? So we can ask the student if it is about physical damage here, which is not, because we can't physically break the habit. And then we just try to find a better synonym, like, is it stop or continue? Is interrupting others good or bad? Should we stop or should we continue? So there is a great contextual clue here. Interrupting others is annoying. Okay, and we also have this statement here. The more information you elicit, the better the word is memorized. which in real classes is not entirely true, because if in class we start eliciting everything about a new word, we are going to face a lot of problems. First of all, it might be confusing for the student. All this information, it's just too much. The second problem is that you have other things to do in your class, not only explore new vocabulary, but also you have grammar to teach, speaking to teach, reading to teach, right? And how much time do you want to spend over one collocation? And finally, not all words require that deep exploration. So break the habit might be a bit confusing, but how about ice cream or bus? You can't go really wrong with these words, and you don't need a lot of synonyms for that. So the key here is to be reasonable and be selective, because we can't teach everything at once. Speaking about the next aspect, which is associations, we should probably look at this picture because it shows how associations work in real life. So we have this cup of coffee and we have morning, and why are they here together? Because every person, maybe not every person, but many people drink coffee in the morning, and these notions are associated with each other. And this is exactly what principle of associations is. So we have to relate the new words to words we already know and our life experiences. If we think about exercises from the platform for this, again, you might want to stop the video here and think about it yourselves. But in fact, most often we have these exercises in "You Can Also Discuss" section. This is how it would look on the platform. We would have some vocabulary exercise, some gap filling or matching or whatever. And then we would see this yellow section, "You Can Also Discuss." We can make it visible for the student, as you know, and inside we will find questions about students' experience in general. Also, you probably will find tasks like, look at the statements. Are they true or false about you? Or do you agree or disagree with the statements about yourself? Also, you will find sentences like, do you know someone who? Which is a great construction, especially if you want to ask an impersonal question. Maybe you don't want to offend your student, or just don't want to go too deep into his personal life. But this construction still allows the student to talk about their experience. Another important tool is visualization. Here I mean pictures. That is the reason why we have pictures in the dictionary, and we sometimes ask students to match words and pictures, again, because visualization reinforces memorization. And finally, mind maps. We don't have mind maps on the platform, but it's a great tool to use with your students to associate new words with old words. Now we are going to look at how we can apply this principle to our Mimbox exercises. Here you can see a screenshot from our intermediate course. Different means of transport. Not actually means of transport, just traveling by train. And here we need some extra practice, to ask some questions to make sure the student understands them correctly and these words are related to the experience. So what questions can we ask? You can pause the video now and think about some ideas of questions that will relate these words to our students' life experiences. But summing up, I can tell you that that questions which you are going to ask will be connected with students' opinion about these things, or with their experience of using or doing these things. And here I have some samples for you. For example, we can ask, like, do you often travel by train? And what things from this list can you see in a railway station? Maybe you can ask, do you prefer buying tickets in a ticket office or online? And why? And how often do you use the underground? Are there any advantages or disadvantages of using the underground? Just a quick tip, guys, when you decide what questions you want to ask, it's always great to first predict what answers you expect to hear. I'm sure that you know that some questions allow more discussion and go further in class just because they're open questions. So if you ask your student just, have you ever been there, or have you ever done this, how many answers are you going to hear? Just 2. We can tell right now how many. But if you ask them, what are advantages or disadvantages of something, how many answers are you going to hear? As many as there are students. So it doesn't mean that you have to avoid yes/no questions, because it's a great opener for discussion, but also you should ask other questions to generate connected vocabulary and to reinforce these important associations. Another exercise which allows a lot of opportunities for associations is an exercise like this. We already covered this in our first principle of cognitive depth. Here our students are going to put words in the following groups, and we can use this information to ask some follow-up questions. For this topic, you could ask questions like, which of these things have you tried? Which of them do you like? Or which of them don't you like? When was the last time you tried? You can put any word here, like you tried watermelon, or you tried blackberry. And how did it happen? Probably there is some kind of story, some memories behind it. And finally, which of them goes best with beer? Maybe it's some nuts or some meat, something that goes well with red wine or ice cream, and so on. So the next step, after we've had some manipulation with the new words and we've built some important associations, will be to finally try to use the word in our own speech. And here comes the principle of recontextualization. The idea of the principle is to use the word learned from one context in a new context or in a new situation of speaking and writing. We have the following activities for this. We can ask our students to retell the story or the text with new words. Ask them to retell the story from the point of view of another character, or do a role play with the student. We have many role plays in our business course. We have some in our general course, but I'm sure that you are creative enough to design your own role plays. But anyway, I'm going to share some instructions, some ideas on how you can work with these activities. Let's start with retelling the story. Here you can see a screenshot from our upper intermediate course, a text about speed dating. There were so many words there, and it would be really challenging for the student to use them in a brand new story of their own. That's why we can simply ask them to retell the text. You can hide the text and put the words in the notes, for example, and ask the student to retell the story using as many words as possible. If you see that your student forgets to use the word, you should stay persistent and remind them about it. You can also ask your student to cross out the words which they used in the story, or cross them out on the go. The next activity is very similar to retelling the story, but in this case our students are going to retell the story from another character's point of view. Here you can see one more screenshot from our upper intermediate course, from the lesson about mini sagas, meeting the boss, about a sleeping poodle. If you remember this, if you don't, you can stop the video and read it. And we can ask the student to imagine that they are the poodle and ask them to retell the story from their point of view. Here you can practice not only new words but the accuracy of speaking, because they're probably going to use other pronouns, and it's going to be a bit challenging, but it's a great way to retell the same story. They don't have to make anything up, and it allows all the opportunities to use the same new words in their speech. The last activity is role play, and although we don't have a lot of exercises built in our lessons. It's not very difficult to design them, so you can use the following instruction. You just need to come up with a situation where your student might need these words and give the following instructions. They should imagine that they are somewhere and that they have some particular role. You need to give the role to yourself and, of course, describe what the student needs to do in this situation. For some activities, like the first one, which is taken from our print immediate course, you can use recordings if the recording is a conversation, and you can just play single lines and let the student respond. And again, to make sure that the student is going to use the word, you can ask them to look at the word list and cross out the words which were used. The next principle is quite easy to anticipate, and the principle is regular revision. There is nothing really new here. We need to revise vocabulary at regular intervals. Unfortunately, we don't have many exercises for revision on our platform. We do have warm-ups, which sometimes revise vocabulary of our previous class, but they don't go further than 2 classes back. We also have tests, 30-minute tests and revise and check tests, but they are supposed to be our students' homework. We don't do that in class. There are different ways to revise words, and we are going to look at one of them and analyze if it's a good way. Look at the conversation between a student and a teacher. This is the word list on the topic friendship. So what is wrong with the way that the teacher revises these words? You can stop the video here, make some predictions, and I'm going to tell you the answer now. That the problem with this revision is that the teacher is eliciting the meaning only, just one aspect. But meaning is just one item in a long list, and this one item is not enough. So this revision doesn't cover all the aspects that our students need to know to use new words correctly and successfully. To avoid this problem, we can use the following activities which I'm going to share. The first is a game called Pictionary. It's a great game to play with your lower level students. Probably you can play it with higher levels as well, but it's really difficult to play with abstract nouns or adjectives. The rules are really simple. You can use attachments here, and you need to draw something on the board, the target word, and ask your student what it is. And of course you can swap roles. The next activity is more suitable for higher levels, and here abstract nouns, abstract adjectives will not be such a problem because our students are going to guess the word through definitions, and they will also try to explain the words with their own definitions. We have some exercises like this on the platform, but actually you can play it in any place where there are pictures. You can just go back to the slide where there are pictures on your target words and ask your students to think of a word, not tell you which, explain the word in their own words, and you will have to guess. And of course you can swap roles. The next activity is gapped sentences. And again, you can use our Vimbox materials to design an exercise like this. You can take any text, maybe a short paragraph containing your target vocabulary, put it in notes, and leave gaps for keywords. To make it easier for the student, you can put the new words or the target words before the text so that they could understand what exactly you want from them. The next exercise that you can use for revision is a mini quiz. Again, our Vimbox materials are applicable here. This is really similar to gapped sentences, but you are going to give options under your target sentence. You can just find some sentences with the words that you're going to revise and turn them into options. And finally, you can use language generating questions. The teacher at the beginning of the principle in that conversation, which I gave you to think about, tried to ask language generating questions, but the teacher didn't ask enough of them. So we need to explore more than just the meaning. For example, for the word intimate, the same word like in that role play, you can also ask, like, what does intimate friend mean? And ask for some associations, like, is intimate friendship a real thing today? For the word breakup, we can elicit the opposite. What is the opposite of breakup? It's makeup. Not quite obvious, right? It's also important to make sure that the student knows the next word, like what's the preposition after breakup? Breakup on, at, with. And again, you can reinforce some associations and ask what ways to get over a breakup they know. For such words as supportive, which implies some word formation, we can ask our students to derive other words, like, is supportive a noun, a verb, or an adjective? It's an adjective, and we can ask for a verb or a noun form. And again, reinforce some associations, generate connected vocabulary, ask them how they support your friends. In this way, we revise many things, not just the meaning, and we reinforce memorization by, again, relating these words to our students' personal experience. We have one more principle here, and the name of the principle is multiple encounters. From the word encounters, which means meeting, you probably will guess that we are going to encounter new words many times in different contexts. In other words, the more often we hear, see, and use the word, the better it is memorized. And I have a question for you guys. What's the difference between revision and multiple encounters? This principle is also called recycling. So if you had some concerns about it, today we're going to finally figure it out. So what's the difference between revision and recycling? You can pause the video and think about it, but I'm going to tell you that one of them is more conscious and one of them is less conscious. One of them is formal, one of them is informal. Which is which? What do you think? In fact, the idea of revision is to recall a word consciously. It's like an exercise that we do to recall some vocabulary. So it's more formal and it's more conscious. While recycling is often passive and more informal. It's similar to what native speakers do with the language. They simply see, hear, and use it. They don't think about word formation or something. So what exercises can we use for multiple encounters? First of all, you know that our course is built that way that our students are going to encounter new words in different lessons, and eventually these new words will become old words. And you always can make recycling more conscious by asking the student to draw their attention to the new word. However, we can't always rely on a course because not all words appear as often as we need and as our students need, of course. So in this case, we will need some extra resources. The first thing that you can use as an extra resource is graded readers. By graded readers, we mean books, texts that have the language level simplified or adapted to help our students to read them easier. We have activities like that in our media section, in articles, for example. We also have graded audiobooks, which is not graded reading, but graded listening, but it also works. And finally, you can go outside Winbox and find some graded readers on the internet. Another exercise or another activity is called narrow reading or narrow listening, depending on what you want to practice. This means consuming a variety of texts on the same topic, narrow topic. That's why it's called narrow reading. For example, let's say that your student is studying vocabulary connected with health issues. Here we have 2 lessons in our general course called Illness and Treatment. Then they will study first aid. But you want to reinforce memorization of new words. So as additional homework, you can give them some articles to read. Sopa's Luxury covers some of the words which we are going to study in the general course. You can also go to news and find one more article about vitamins here. And finally, also in news you can find a piece of news about 3D printed heart, and some words from our general course are also going to be covered here. So the student will be able to hear and see them. How many? 1, 2, 3 times. And I'm sure that there are other exercises. So this topic is quite rich in our platform. If your students have time to work independently, and of course if they have a wish to work independently, you can just suggest some series to read or to watch, like TV series of books, comics, and so on, because within this series vocabulary is more or less fixed and students are going to encounter more or less the same words. So if you want to work on the platform, go to our media section where you will find a lot of resources, articles, life hacks, news, audiobooks, and so on. If you want to go outside Inbox, there are a lot of places where you can find graded readers or series. So guys, we've covered all the 5 principles, and now it's time to summarize them and work out a clear strategy. So today we started with the thought that it's our role as teachers to help our students to transfer information from short-term memory to long-term memory, which is not an easy thing to do, but which is possible to accomplish if we have enough practice. And we can't help our students with this practice if we don't do any activities or exercises with them. The choice of exercises depends on principles of vocabulary learning, and today we discussed 5 principles, which can be divided into 3 stages. The first stage is called elaboration, where we manipulate new words and try to understand as much information about it as we need to use the word correctly. The next stage is called rehearsal, where we have to use the word in new situations of speaking and writing. And finally goes retrieval, because the more often we retrieve information from long-term memory, the easier it is to access in the future. These 3 stages are not a chain, it's a cycle, which means that we have to perform these stages regularly, but also we need to hear, see, and use the word as often as possible through multiple encounters. So probably after listening to this information, you have an impression that there are so many things to cover, and probably you are not really sure how and when you're going to do this, because our time in class is limited. We have just 50 minutes for everything, and we have these 3 stages, but also we have speaking to teach, grammar to teach, reading to teach. And some of you might be wondering, how am I going to fit all these principles into my 50-minute class and not sacrifice other activities? And for you guys, I have the answer. Do you know this joke? If you want to pause the video and think, you're welcome, but I can tell you that you can't eat an elephant at once. You need to eat it one bite at a time. So guys, embrace the fact that we won't have time to teach everything, especially everything at once. And it's not necessary, because our short-term memory is limited in duration and accommodation. What it means is that we have to be selective and choose what is relevant for the student at this particular moment of study. So guys, that was all that I wanted to share with you today, and before you continue with the practical workshop, you need to follow the link and do the pre-workshop test to check how well you understand this material. I hope this information was useful for you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the practical workshop. Thank you for being with me today. Have a great day.